This summer, serve up the cookout classics, Kraft mayo and dressing. Toss green salads with delicious ranch dressing or zesty Italian. Serve smooth, craveably creamy potato salads with mayo. We all know it's not a cookout without Kraft.
LinkedIn is pretty amazing at helping you grow your small business. We cannot stop your new clients from emailing you at 3 a.m. We can help you sell, market, and hire in one place. We cannot help you be in 3 places at once. And while we can't help you organize your calendar, LinkedIn can help you land more clients so you have a calendar to organize. Grow your small business on LinkedIn. Learn more at linkedin.com/smallbusiness.
Hello and welcome to The Shift, the podcast that aims to tell the no-holds-barred truth about being a woman post-40. Created and hosted by me, writer and broadcaster Sam Baker. Now, today's episode will take you ricocheting back to the 90s in all the ways. Canadian singer, songwriter and photographer Melissa Auf der Maur is best known as the bassist of Hole throughout the mid-late 90s. And consequently, she had a front row seat at the pillorying of Hole's legendary frontwoman, Courtney Love. As she puts it, I watched society burn a woman at the stake. For a few years, she was at the heart of 2 of the era's biggest bands, moving from Hole to the Smashing Pumpkins, before releasing several solo albums. In 2007, she was named one of the 100 greatest women in rock and roll. Then she stepped away from the music scene when she had her daughter. It's those years, the fever dream of the 90s, that Melissa revisits in her memoir, Even the Good Girls Will Cry, which takes us on a journey through the good, the bad, and the ugly of what it meant to be a woman making music in the last decade of the 20th century. It will take you back, it will give you chills, it will make you cringe, and it will make you rage.
It takes a long time to figure out how I benefited, because in fact, I really ran from the 90s for a solid decade without looking back. It was like, thank you, goodbye, run, find myself. I don't want it, don't look, don't get trapped, don't talk to them. It was insane. I was truly running from what some people might think is an incredible, I mean, luckily for me, actually, a lot of people did recognize that it was quite a rough scene I had joined. So a lot of people had awareness that there was a lot of challenge and, undeniable darkness that I was being asked to contend with.
Melissa joined me from upstate New York to talk about her big midlife resurrection, what it cost to revisit those years of glamour and destruction, falling back in love with music in her 50s, discovering her redhead superpower, being an annoying mother, re-establishing joyful sisterhood with Courtney, and reclaiming the innocence of the girl who started it all. As Melissa puts it, the shift is real. I was thinking when I was reading the memoir, there's a slight sense of remove, a slight outsiderness. Do you think, is that as well as, which we'll talk about a bit more later, as well as being the sober one in a tight-knit group of addicts, as you put it, was there an element of Canadianness in that, do you think?
Yeah, I had an interesting interview the other day with an Australian journalist, and he really picked up on that because obviously Australia, even more so than Canada, has this sort of outside, inside the Western world identity, part of the Commonwealth, but its own thing. It's so far away. So he picked up on it a lot. We talked a lot about that being both my sense of inside outsider. I'm also a dual citizen. My mother's American. So I've always had this both in me. And at this point, I've lived equally in the 2 places. I've actually lived in the United States longer now than Canada, which is upsetting to me, but I'm making up for it by having an epic Canadian year. I'm working on so many big Canadian projects, and I feel like I'm making up for all of my time away. But I think it's in Warrior Goddess where I'm talking about the rage and the pain of the people I've landed in the storm with, And yes, there's addiction. Yes, there's fame and suicide and death. But the common denominator is Americans who are neglected, who happen to also come from broken homes and mental instability and addiction. But America is an unfair nation. I was born and raised being told by an expat. My mother left for a reason. She felt the injustices were unacceptable. My father was a radical social democrat. He has zero interest in, any kind of capitalism. He's a man of the people. He fights for the people. He's not a protector of the corporations. He's the opposite of that. So I was raised with obvious, clear indoctrination of people first and government are there to serve the people. The moment I stepped over the other side into this world of broken people, I had no choice but to identify and associate it with the government of these people are neglected. They do not have, in extreme cases like Courtney, she doesn't even know what love is. Her parents never gave her love, but then add a shitty society and add no access, well, especially now, it's getting worse every decade, education, healthcare, every possible guns. I mean, it's just gotten worse, but it was, pretty bad. My mother left in the 60s for a reason, this is not, and I'm not anti-American. In fact, ever since the shit has hit harder here, I have more compassion for the United States than ever. I have more compassion and care and concern for the people who are underserved and now generations upon generations of underserved. So that outsider, it's the Canadian, it's the socialist, it's the fear of selling out of the 90s, but also an actual person who believes that being a freelance weirdo is totally successful. That's what you do. You just do you. You don't have to have money and fame. You can just be a successful you.
It's all that stuff, isn't there? When you're a kid and you're a kid that doesn't quite fit the brief, whether that's being ginger in a non-ginger world, as I was, and I'm assuming you were a bit.
Oh, very.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, it was only really when I moved up to Scotland that I was like, oh, that's where they all are.
Yeah. Yeah. The redhead thing is a fundamental other for sure. I've always had it. I mean, yes. Always been, now, of course, I see it as a superpower, but as a young person, it was completely embarrassing on a lot of levels, and also attention grabbing that I didn't like. There was a lot of comments as a little girl walking down the street, and my daughter gets it. My daughter has redder hair than I do. And I see how strangers talk to her on the street about it. Usually it's, wow, how amazing, incredible, what amazing hair. But I remember being 10 or 12 and creepy guys saying weird things to me on the street about being a redhead, inappropriate, sexualized, strange things. And then, of course, when you look back at the history of witches and of course, muses, I have, I've had this on my wall. I lost it along the way, but I had this poster on my wall since I was 12 years old, because I went to art school and I found myself in the muses. And then in university researched, who is this woman? Who is her? She is Simonetta. She died of consumption by the age of 24. She was Botticelli's main muse. And when I started working as an artist, reflecting on the women's place in the history of art throughout all time, not just rock music of the 90s, I was always searching for the subtle story behind the thing. And then that also ties into being a bass player. I don't want to be a front person. I don't want, and then it also has why the sort of meta side of me where I'm a photographer photographing myself being in the band with the huge people. It's all connected to stemming from being a redhead and then being a Canadian in a corporate world and then being a bass player who's not the attention seeker. But when I won my first bass award in 98, I had to write an acceptance speech on the way. And I was in the limo and I was the bass, the mother of all instruments, the one that no one notices until it's gone away. I've always understood that I fit a kind of place in every space that I keep that is subtle. It's a subtle kind of occupation but highly self-aware of where I sit to the left of something,
It's so interesting you say that, because like I have made lots of notes about the way that your bass kind of as we go through Even the Good Girls Will Cry, the bass really seems to become armor in a way. And you've got, the love of photography even before the bass comes into play, where the camera is kind of between you and the action always. So it's forming like a barrier.
A shield, yes, totally. I mean, it's 100%. Yeah, it was my magic wand / protector. And then it was the lens of the camera that protected me from being too inside. Even when I was just a 14-year-old shy person in school, trying to find my way and have a voice of my own, photographing myself in a mirror alone in a bathroom made me feel empowered, even though I was shy and unable to like really showboat in any other way. But it gave me agency of my life. And then when I found the dark room and I got to be alone hiding and then watch something appear, it felt like very powerful. And so, yes, I did find everyone has to find their people and everyone has to find their tools. Everyone needs to, and I'm very lucky that I found both very, very intuitively, but very quickly and intensely. Like I dove right in, and then I guess people intuitively picked up on that. Like when Billy saw something in me, he just saw like a very direct, even though I'm subtle and shy, very passionate about finding my way. And it really paid off. And, I often think about what I'm trying to convey to young women because it's dedicated to my daughter and her friends. And I just, the wayfinder, you inside and you alone, is really your greatest ally, your only source of protection at the end of the day, because shit will hurt and people will hurt you and you will get lost. And you and only you, if you have that strong sense of built up tools and built up talents and your own dialogue with yourself, then you can get through anything. And this is through the language of like privileged people. This is like, people who have bombs over their heads and whose families are being ripped apart by militias is not in the same boat as we are as the privileged people of the world. Yeah.
No, of course. Can you remember how old were you when you started to consciously develop these kind of, survival tools?
It definitely started very, very young in my diary. I remember the first, where I was when I began my first diary. I was on an airplane alone at, I think, about 9 years old, going to meet my father, who I was only with on the weekends and like a special trip a year. And I was flying alone to Spain to meet up with my very eccentric and very loving and fun, but intense father. And I was traveling alone at a young age. And I had this little flower, like padded fabric diary, very like 70s little like girl. It was yellow with white and blue and red flowers. And I remember sitting on the plane and starting to talk to myself. And I still have that diary in this room. And I haven't actually looked at what the very first entry is. That I should do. But I remember so clearly flying back, because I flew there and back alone, empowered and giving this travel diary of these children I saw in the square in Spain selling little wooden figurines to be able to, because they didn't have money and they had to sell on the street, and like recognizing children in other countries. And I remember like drawing a little figurine, like these little children were selling. And I remember so clearly starting that dialogue with myself of where I traveled to and where, at this point I was only 9, but I had already traveled around the world with my mother by the age of 2. So I probably, in my young consciousness had already done these wild trips, Africa, Morocco. And it probably had started way back when, but me just trying to make sense of me and me alone, because my mother was a single mother at home for the majority of the time, I was alone a lot with babysitters whose names we don't remember. So I have no idea who took care of me. And my mother doesn't really either. She remembers one.
Your mother and father were both like huge personalities, weren't they?
Huge. My mother, the most beautiful woman in Montreal. And I literally am not the only one to say it. Wasn't just my adoration for her. She was early impressions of my parents, who I obviously idolized and looked up to my whole life. And then had, I think a large part of my self-discovery was motivated by my intimidation of how am I going to live up to this? Like, my mother would walk down the street and eyes would follow her. Boys in high school would come up to me and ask me about my mother. Is she picking you up? Like, just so much like beauty attention around my mother. And then my father, due to his larger than life public persona, his eyes followed him down the street for other reasons, as they knew who he was and they voted for him, or they read his column, or they listened to him on the radio. I was growing up under such large shadows of these remarkable people. And it has a huge part of why I was equipped to enter the big shadows of, the 90s rock mythology that I ended up brought to. I didn't try to get there, as we know in the story. I was discovered and taken. I was not looking for that. I really was taken to the underworld and asked to figure it out, and I took it very seriously. I saw it as a giant fairy tale moral lesson. This good girl has to go find something in the abyss. That's my job. And it's for me. It's not just for you. I'm not just going to serve you in the abyss. I'm going to also, in my destined relationships with those wild characters, felt on par with my parents. There's some reason why these incredible people have yet again sort of brought me in their midst. I'm so lucky to be here.
Yeah, I mean, that really comes across, that sense that you kind of almost replace, your larger than life mum and dad with kind of Billy and Courtney.
Yeah, my grunge parents. It was very clear, very quick that these were my new set of parents and my new obstacle of, okay, so now you found your way into this amazing world, but now how are you going to surpass this shadow? It was a lot of, in fact, great opportunities for me to find myself. Had I been a person who was just, remained a big fish in a small pond or something, maybe I would have gotten stuck, like a little stagnant. Like I'm very grateful. I have, zero regrets of doing it. I mean, I love the story I got, but it did take a lot of work now later in life to unpack it and heal from the things that were not very healthy environmental lessons and painful to be around so much pain.
Yeah, I mean, there's a point you make towards the end of the book. And I should say for the listeners, I'm not going to make Melissa go through the entire story. You're going to have to buy the book and read that. But we'll obviously dip in and out of it. There's a bit towards the end of the book where you talk about, I can't remember exactly how you put it, but you basically say that, the creative experience was brilliant and these are not quite the right words, the personal experience was pretty bleak at some points, and that both of that can be true, which I think we're not very good at acknowledging, that two conflicting things can be true at any one time anymore.
Exactly. That was a huge breakthrough for me, in fact, while writing, because a big part of me going backwards was, finally being honest with myself about the pain and losing my best friend in the band, Patty, to her addiction, and then being thrust into this abnormally commercial expectations, both musically, but also visually, and having to step into this role as a pretty girl in the band to the, wild, strong woman, and all these things that I had to do that didn't feel good. I didn't and were heartbreaking. I mean, with the loss of Patty, although she's alive now and we are reconnected, but at that time, losing my father and my best friend and my basically integrity and my sense of was debilitating. I became a very broken, numb, yet highly functioning, very, there and showing up for my role. But it wasn't until I was writing the book where I admitted to myself how painful that was at the time, but also that revelation that you just said, where I actually also, with 20 years hindsight, see the beauty and the power of what I was given, but mainly a lot of pain is given as a tool to grow, and that there is both these things when you have two things going at once, it usually means it's a conflict that's an opportunity to grow, like the yin yang. You're in this sort of like tug of war of like, I love it, I hate it, I'm in pain, I'm in ecstasy. And those are usually the places where that friction where you can grow. And sometimes it takes a long time to figure out how I benefited. Because in fact, I really ran from the 90s for a solid decade without looking back. It was like, thank you, goodbye, run, find myself. I don't want it, don't look, don't get trapped, don't talk to them. It was insane. I was truly running from what some people might think is an incredible, luckily for me, actually, a lot of people did recognize that it was quite a rough scene I had joined. So a lot of people had awareness that there was a lot of challenge and, undeniable darkness that I was being asked to contend with, and to find a way to keep a light going in me, because I understood also even at the time that that's what I was offering. I came pure of heart. I came Canadian, good girl, undamaged, non-addicted. I came all like with a purpose to bring light to a very difficult situation and, life after death, quite literally, in honor of Kristen who died. That alone, I was replacing a tragic death of a beautiful, young, talented woman. That alone is horrendous, and those dualities of you can be both learning an incredible thing and being totally devastated. And it could take decades to unpack and heal that wound. This book was primarily created out of necessity to heal and unpack. Then there's the other offerings that it can give to readers or my daughter and all of the outside ripple effects, but and to our generation, and the ode to all the things that I love in the book and I honor: music, fans, Montreal, my parents, so it's a giving back to all the incredible things I love that made me and nurtured me. And then it's also a reveal for myself of unimaginable pain that sometimes I just never dealt with until I wrote it out. And yes, it's a newfound peaceful passion for a girl who loves but quit playing music on the road and exchanging, that level of volume and that level of visceral intensity of performance. Who knew that sitting by the fire with a cat on the lap and just writing alone for a whole day could give me a sense of true, like, energetic power of just like the power of healing that this has offered me, and mainly a new way to envision my days. My days have always been, even once I quit music and became a mother to a small person and started a nonprofit art center and promoted and produced and curated, and I've always had a very loud and busy life. And this is a revelation for me to have a quiet place to go to that I really want to continue going to. It was deeply rewarding.
This episode of The Shift is sponsored by Shopify. I can clearly remember starting The Shift. It's such a leap, isn't it? Going out there on your own, doing a new thing. What if it doesn't work? What if nobody listens? What if all the tech comes crashing down around me? Now, over 5 years and over 250 episodes later, I know different, of course. Starting The Shift was the best thing I ever did. And it helps to have a partner like Shopify on your side to help. For a start, they'll help you get the word out, like you have a whole marketing team behind you with easy-to-run email and social media campaigns. Shopify's your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to shipping, returns, everything. And if you get stuck, their award-winning 24/7 customer support is always around to advise. It's time to turn those what-ifs into... With Shopify today. Sign up for your £1 a month trial today at shopify.co.uk/shift. Go to shopify.co.uk/shift. That's shopify.co.uk/shift. What influenced the timing? I mean, why now?
There's many, like the beer bottle and the fan letter and all the magical fairy tale things that led me to find my way into the big giant rock saga. This has had a similar sort of destined sort of unfolding. There's been, I rekindled, Courtney and I reconnected about 8 years ago and started, quite literally when the dreaded election happened. And I told my daughter before she went to bed, we're going to have a female president tomorrow. This is how exciting this is how far we've come. The moment that new world hit and the reality of, this is probably what our generation was fearing ever since the war that broke out after 9/11, it's been pretty bleak, but we couldn't have imagined it would get so much worse. And for the first time, it was in 2016, 2017, I felt this because Courtney and I, we had rekindled, and in 2020, we were going to have, do a Planned Parenthood fundraiser. And it was the first time we were ever going to play whole songs. And it was in March of 2020, and it was canceled by the pandemic. But it started in 2016, 2017, 2018, and then the Roe versus Wade and all these like backwards feelings. And I had this clear sense of, where is Courtney when we need her? We need these anthems. What is happening? And I reached out to her, and I had been avoiding. She hadn't been well. She's very well now. She's the best she's ever been. She has an incredibly nurturing team around her who have really helped her. Her new record, I sang on it this past year. It's incredible. This 2026 accidental simultaneous resurrection of both of us, poetic accident, never planned, but we did reconnect in the last 8 years and started having this dialogue of the role, what whole was, how she never plays the victim, but I am angry about obviously the way the world treated her, but I also am angry about where the legacy of this band sits. And I'm just a small half of the band legacy, but that arc of that band from Pretty on the Inside to Live Through This to Celebrity Skin is one of the most important relative feminist evolutions and it's all her in her lyrics and her as a woman and the way, and the fact that she is not given the credit she is due in anything, not as a performer, not as a musician, not as the lyricist. So it just started percolating of this is unfair and we need women. What's happened to the women's movement is the other question. What the hell is happening? I am from a feminist, my mother as a pioneer broke every wall and door down for me, so I need to continue this for my daughter. How is this? So a huge part of it was really that of just what, in whole and my role in whole and my witnessing from a credible standpoint, watching the world. And I'm a together credible witness of what happened to Courtney and what happened to Whole. I felt I have to tell my story because this is unacceptable. And then within it, there's all the micro things. My father's death, which was unbearable, that happened during my time in Whole, that I never looked at, that I never even told my therapist the truth of how my father died until I was writing the book. I just, had so many blocks of and Patty simultaneously. I had not, yes, she was alive and she got married and she had a child but the real healing hadn't become. So there was so much deeply personal necessity, untended garbage that I needed. And then there was also just the women at large and not just for women in rock in the 90s and Whole. This is like the history of women. This is where we have to continue this story and describe what we saw and what we hope. And then there's, of course, the analog digital transformation, and then the capitalist greed and the stealing of our scene. And now the algorithms that are preying on my daughter and her friends to go backwards in time and look like 80s porn stars. Like, what is happening? What is happening? So I had to start. I have to start and join the dialogue of what did I see? What is my perspective on this? What is my lens, both as a writer, as a musician, as a photographer? I need to reestablish. I see this memoir as my mission statement as a Gen X very, thriving survivor because I don't have, I have grief in me, but I don't have brain damage. My body is strong. I have to participate in my generation and in my leadership as a woman who spent 17 years trying to represent women on a male-dominated scape. And a lot of people are like, there's so many women in music. I'm like, no, you still don't understand. We were one of the few women on the bill. Don't tell me there's so many women in music. Sure, on the faraway lens, you see, of course, that moment in the 90s, which is what inspired me, myself, to pick up a bass. The Kim Gordons, the Kim Deals, the L7, the Babes in Toyland. Yeah, but that was like 5 minutes. That was not forever. And then, yes, of course, now we have Olivia Rodrigo, we have Taylor Swift, we have Billie Eilish, we have all of that. But there was a lot in between that didn't happen. And all of those amazing young women who are phenomenal. Like, I couldn't be more excited for my daughter to just naturally have access to all of these female voices. But they are not raging and screaming at a system. They are already in the system and they have arrived for a reason. And I don't want credit. But I give my mother credit for how I daringly went and did what I did. And I don't want anyone to give me and Courtney credit or our amazing generation credit, but I think it's important for the history books to record how did this happen. And then also a lot of what happened is that creepy, powerful, greedy men recognize the power of women and recognize the power of young women and recognize that, a 15-year-old woman alone with this beautiful angelic self can maybe become a huge pop star. That, guess what? The most loyal fans are the beautiful young women who want to see themselves in a place of power and are going to put all of their time and money and energy and all their algorithm, value into these other powerful women. So we're in a system. Yes, it doesn't take away of the power of Taylor or Billie, but you have to see the context in which we are feeding young girls and preying on them, and that's all my role as an annoying mother of a 14-year-old and all of her friends is don't trust that. Yes, there's beauty on the internet, but holy shit, they are trying to get you. They are trying to get you hooked, insecure, consuming, flipping, liking, seeing your value based on likes. Like, no. You alone in the bedroom with a guitar, that's power. You getting 100 likes, that is dangerous.
Yeah. Do you think they're tougher than we were, or do you think, because there's so many young women you encounter are like, I'm not putting up with that shit. But then the flip side of that is like the algorithm and the face tuning and the likes and the...
Right. It almost cancels it out, and then there's you have all this natural empowerment and a couple, a history now of a couple of generations of women who can, but I never let a day go by remembering that when my grandmother was born, she couldn't vote. When my mother became a feminist, she barely could get a credit card. I mean, this is not small things. These are huge issues. And that I don't want any teenage girl who can she should not take that for granted. Women's safety, we can't take for granted. The pariahs on the internet that are trying to, do terrible predatory things with little girls that's not, I talk about it openly with these girls of just, there's no way, you can never take your safety for granted, women. There is sexual predators on every turn, unfortunately. I don't inject it with fear. I inject it with look at the power, and knowledge is power, and self-awareness is power. And you can be beautiful, and you don't have to wear a sack. You can do you, express yourself, but be aware of what the gaze around you is. I mean, this used to be part of our education, the male gaze, the women on these fashion magazine spreads. And, our mothers stopped shaving their armpits for a reason, because they weren't going to just give the men what they wanted. They started changing. And yeah, so there's progress, of course. I mean, there's so many cool new body image options for beauty and empowerment and, weirdness and queerness. And of course, there's all kinds of progress. I'm not saying there isn't, but evil is creeping up equally. it's also rising up so it can try to tear the progress down. I mean, we see it literally in the United States of America. This is a result of progress. Oh, you got a black president, and then you thought you'd get a woman? We're just going to counteract that here.
And so many things have happened, I mean, particularly in the last year, but actually, like you say, in the last 8 years, where you just wouldn't have even believed that they could happen.
Impossible. And that to me is why also, the fairy tale quality of my book, where it's never been lost on me. But of course, once I wrote it, and I really wanted to highlight how much of this kind of came from the outs, all of these forces were pushing me towards this place and giving me a sense of purpose and calling. But the fairy tale elements and the moral of my story in many ways is be polite, tell people you love them, work hard, and you will succeed. Take care of yourself when you need to. There's very kind of like simple arcs of my story that quite literally an apology for a beer bottle is how I got into a band. And I'm a good, polite person and I don't ruffle feathers too much. So there's those elements. But then there's also that whole layer of the rock saga of like, the Jesus Christ that is Kurt, and then the Medusa that is Courtney, and the demon, all of these things that happen in, pop culture and rock mythology. And within that, there is, I believe, there is good and evil. There is good and evil forces. And there's no, to me, any other way of explaining the phenomenon of what is happening currently in the Western world and the evil that is perpetrating and throwing bombs on children and separating families and threatening to take women's rights away from them in certain parts of this country I live in. That is evil. That is a force of evil. And so you can often, people make fun of me for looking at astrology. Astrology is just an ancient story of archetypes of what happens in human life. This is not because I only believe in the sun and the stars and the moons controlling my destiny, but I'm not going to deny that the power of the universe might affect tiny little humans on a planet. It affects the tides. It's going to affect something in me as well. I'm not more powerful than the ocean. In fact, I'm much smaller than the ocean. So for me, I do think we're entering a world where we should be contemplating quite basic questions of the forces of good and evil. Are you going to fight for good or are you going to join evil? It might be that simple. And yes, can you have both and in a lifetime go between the two and get trapped in an evil vortex? Yeah, can you go back and course correct? And, in my case, I just want to be able to live with myself and know that I made the right decisions for me and that I served a better, higher force. And I didn't get trapped in a greedy system that wants to take and hurt and suck the life of people.
I mean, I definitely think that there comes a point in not everyone's lives, but a lot of people's lives, certainly a lot of the women I've spoken to, when it may be like late 40s, early 50s, a midlife kind of thing where it becomes maybe not suddenly, maybe it's gradual, but it becomes important in a way that it maybe had not been when you were younger, to be able to look yourself in the mirror in the morning and know that you're not looking at someone who is making other people's lives worse.
Or this is the fine line, like you said about my testimony and in the moment of the book where I say I both loved my musical experience and hated my personal experience in the band. When you said, look in the mirror, I could see two things you were going to say. Not making people's lives worse and not only working to make other people's lives better and not your own.
Yes.
So it's this bizarre duality of I both have to be good and offering everything to everyone while not betraying myself and not underserving myself. For me, that's the big middle life resurrection. Is that, and what's interesting is the moment I started reclaiming myself for myself, out of pure just daughter turns 10 and 11, I don't have to be by her side as much. I start writing my book. I'm filling my hours of my day a bit more for me. As I start to do that, my creative force starts to flourish. I start to bloom. I head towards 50. I decide I want to be part of the dialogue. I want to go back into the world and talk to women and young people and music lovers and witches, and I want to talk to everybody, and anti-tech people and pro-tech people. I want to go start talking. The moment I started reclaiming myself and seeing it's not going to go well if I just ignore my needs and I just sort of drain myself for others. Even if others aren't asking, I don't have the father of my child is a wonderful human. It's not that he was asking me to not do it. I just didn't do it because this is how programmed we are.
And how you were trained as a child. I mean, I think I read an interview with you, I think in the New York Times, where you were saying someone had described you as a monster whisperer. And that kind of training to be the good girl, to accept the requests, demands, behavior of people with ostensibly bigger personalities than you, but not necessarily, just louder personalities. You know, that's something that you learn super young, isn't it? And it takes a long time to go, actually, and I hate this cliche, but I'm going to use it. Sorry, I'm going to put my mask on here. You know, I'm going to put my own mask on because I've been worrying about you guys too much.
And when you are around drama and pain and chaos, it's really hard to have time for your quiet inner self. And that's what, young children and motherhood is. Of course, you're always going to be pulled out of yourself to make sure the diaper is changed and the person is fed and the tears are addressed. You're not going to. So, I had already been a pretty good girl, and then I became a mother. And then it all sort of just started unfolding for me as I realized I have to get myself back for my daughter. I have to do it for her. That's why the book again is for her. Is that and I think it's so universal and common. And it's like this, all of a sudden you wake up and you're going to change. And that happens when we're enter puberty. It happens when we enter that peak 27, 20. You're entering this fabulous moment where you realize, oh, now I have to decide if I'm going to get married. Now I have to decide if I'm going to have a kid. Now I have to face these power woman questions. And then you get past that point and now you're in this exciting new point. I don't know what copy you have, but because we're in a Scottish land
I've
here,
got this one.
Is it the hardcore? Yeah. And I'm going to read Shirley Manson's lovely blurb about my book because I think it's so, I reached out to her very early on and I sent her a copy and I said, no pressure, but if I'm looking for blurbs of other women musicians because there's actually not a lot of peers of mine. As much as we all think there is a million women in the 90s, but I don't have that many peers, and not just the redhead thing, but Shirley and I do think have a similarity in the way we've conducted ourselves. And so her blurb for my book is, our 90s fever dreams were so beautiful, but they were also brutal. And only the good girls like Melissa have the guts to tell you that. And her just grasping, I have to tell the story because it serves myself, but it also serves others. I want to tell the truth behind the veil of what this overly glamorized time and period and fame and fortune and even the glamour of Kurt and Courtney and destruction and heroin and blah. There's just so many myths in there that, and I want to be even keeled and sort of showing the behind and front of the veil of many of these wonderful life lessons I got to have so early on in life. I really, between my family and my amazing parents and then this wild journey in the rock bands, I do feel I got unique access to big lessons that can serve me, obviously, in growing into my middle age and gracefully dance into my death. I feel that I have just simple life lessons that are helpful for people who are on their hunt, trying to make the most of this beautiful, short and precious life that we're given. How lucky are we?
What's going on? I'm Arch Manning, Viore athlete and college quarterback. Whether I'm running, training, traveling, or just unwinding at home, I love doing it in my core shorts from Viore. With a breathable boxer brief liner, they're quick to dry, super versatile, and stand up to even my most intense training sessions. Plus, they come in 3 inseams and a ton of colors. Ready to try a pair? Go to viore.com/arch and get 20% off at checkout. I think you're going to love them as much as I do. That's viore.com/ARCH and get 20% off your first order. Exclusions apply. Visit the website for full terms and conditions. Not only will you receive 20% off your first purchase, but enjoy free shipping on any U.S. orders over $75 and free returns. Have a great day.
And so what is your relationship with music now? Have you regained the love?
Well, I always worship it, but I always hold it as a higher part of human creation. It's one of, I really do believe, the most powerful art form. I, of course, admire every other, but the thing that is happening when a musician is channeling and then offers it to others who get to either sit at home alone in a room listening to, you can't hold it. You can't, it's this very ether thing. So my admiration is always there, but a lot of this book was me trying to reclaim the innocence of the girl who started before she had to go through this really brutal machine and as well brutal emotional landscape. Through my journey of writing this book, my commitment to myself is to find the quiet purity in there. And it's starting as far as returning to the bass, because for those who don't know, I really did quit music when I became a mother, but I had been on the road for 17 years and I had gone to music school my whole life. There was not a moment. And then I worked at clubs when I was in art school. I just have always been active in music. And when I quit music, I started a music art center and I got to present bands. So I've always been in and around the power of music. But when I dropped the making of it, I did lose a very precious part of my inner life because I kind of sacrificed music basically to this bigger machine and this very complex identity of bass player of this and that. And I made solo records, but the whole time it was this establishing of I am also my own person. There was such a fight involved in music in me. And I will tell you a wonderful later in life story is that I have been in the studio in the past year creating what is a soundtrack to my multimedia memoir. So I have my memoir, which is my written mission statement, and I'm writing an hour-long score, very ambient. It embodies everything from field recordings in the 90s to early 4-track recordings to my bass and me now, creating what is called the Bass Womb Room, which is a room also in the museum exhibits that I am putting together. So the companion piece to the memoir is in 6 months, my photo book comes out. And the photo book has a museum exhibit, and the museum exhibit has a room called the Bass Womb Room, which is my ode to my bass, to the fans, to the music, and the inner, deep, 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 quiet inner world of the girl and her bass, but then also the giant cosmos of these crowds. So I'm creating a conceptual music piece, and it's going to come out in the fall with my book. And it's very free and it's very weird, and it is not me trying to write a hit song. I'm way past that. I don't want to chase hits. I want to create an atmosphere from my inner self to match the offering of my books that I'm putting out this year. And it's very innocent and very abstract, and it's much more actually like how I started music, alone in a room and trying to find my way, like when I didn't know what I was doing. I was just experimenting, and that was such a magical time. So I am crawling back into the womb and going to have an oddball offering that will come out in the fall.
Courtney is teasing that you are going back on the road with her. Is that?
The mystery of how Courtney and I are both revealing ourselves in 2026 after 15 years of really both taking ourselves off of the just in total hibernation from any kind of public engagement. I mean, I guess she's had in and out of the internet, but this is a big, I think, because we couldn't have lined this up even if we tried, but the fact that her album and this documentary film that reframes her, my book that reframes her, and my own story that reclaims my agency of the bass player has her own story. The fact that it's all happening at the same time it would almost be silly to not consider what we can do together, because we are the happy ending. A, Courtney's alive. She should have been dead. B, we are closer than we have ever been. We are in joyful contact. We say, I love you, which we never would have done in our odd, difficult 90s world together.
Not the dumb thing then, was it?
No, exactly. Everyone was so cool and we're just like soft with each other, supportive of each other, excited for each other. So anything could happen. But the fact is, like romantic love and like music, you can't control that magic. I don't know if it will happen. The timing is looking interesting, but there is no concrete plan. She's just being a trickster because she's good at that. She's doing her magic thing. And it caught me off guard too. I had no idea what was happening. But yes, do I love her? Yes. Do I want to make music again in my life? Yes. Am I proud of her? Singing on her record, I would have been there for her anyway. But when I was in that vocal booth singing alongside, bringing that siren song from myself out back to her warrior goddess scream, it felt more powerful than my brain could have predicted. I felt a cellular reboot, and I felt a calling again of, we are here for each other and we need to be there for each other. And it's a good story of sisterhood for anyone who cares, reading, watching, listening. It's a very powerful friendship of women between us. And it's not, we both know that. We are trying to continue to make good on our commitment to the story of women and complicated stories of women, because A, she could have been dead, but B, she could hate me because I left her band long ago. Yeah. And I didn't look back for a long time.
And you left mum for dad.
Yes.
You didn't, but on the face of it.
Yeah. And she has always respected me for my independence and my doing it my way. And that's what makes us a good match too, because I respect her in her wild ways. I'm not trying to control her. I'm not going to try to figure out how she's going to get it done. In fact, I'm going to admire her in her wild chaos. That's what I do. So that is it. This is our happy story of sisterhood, and the shift is real. And I have been spreading the word to all the women in my, mother group, where we're raising our daughters together. And I'm a little older than most mothers because I waited till 40 to have my daughter. And I've been like marching around for the past few years, empowered by this story in this book of two things, which has been get ready to turn 50. Wow. Midlife resurrection time. So exciting. And flip side of that is the 22-year-old in me that I honored in this book has been my teacher. She is helping the 50-year-old grow cooler, and trust herself and trust her wild dreams and intuition, and get young again in a cool way, in a rooted, real, I'm a mother and a middle-aged woman, but I am in tune with my wild young girl who knew what the fuck she wanted. She did it. And I'm just here honoring her now, and she's helping me do it again.
I love that. I will let you go in a minute. I'm just going to ask you the questions that I always ask at the end. And you haven't done your homework, which is great. That's my favorite situation. What's your emotional age?
I hover between 12 and 102.
That's my favorite answer. I love that. Why is that?
I just have always felt ancient. And when I was 12 was when I awoke to my ancientness. I remember at 12 understanding infinity and understanding that I am all ages all at once.
Give us a book recommendation. So it can be anything. It can be something you've loved forever, or it can be new.
I'm torn between something that people might not go find, or something that's out there now that I'm reading that is blowing my mind.
You can do both if you want.
Maybe because everybody loves Just Kids, obviously, correct?
Absolutely.
But Patty's this new book, I love more than I love Just Kids, because it goes into that, the less fabulous, it's the depth of when she left music, when, her childhood and what made her. So The Bread of Angels has been a profound new, and because I, without that, had been already thinking about the second book of my motherhood chapter and the leaving music and the why. So that's just been remarkable read. And the reason why I always say this book is that I am a nonfiction maniac. I only really love real stories. It's very hard to capture me fiction-wise, because all I'm ever thinking about is, what real person is this based on? Carson McCullers, The Heart is the Lonely Hunter. Very rare for me to get just devour fiction, especially of another time. But, intuitively, I guess I knew that person was way ahead of her time in a channeled stories from some wisdom. She was so young when she wrote that. And I love that title, The Heart is a Lonely Hunter.
That's perfect. What advice would you give younger women?
You know it all already. It's all within you. Just believe it and don't listen to others who try to tell you, especially don't listen to the algorithms. No. Even your parents, good parents don't tell you what to do. Good parents let you become. Listen to yourself.
Who is your old broad role model? So who's an older woman who's inspired you?
Oh, I'm going to give a shout out to, she is a very important in the world of photography in New York, Lynn Davis. Look her up. She was strangely what she's most known for, similar to Pat. She's friends with Patty. She was a contemporary of Mapplethorpe. And when Mapplethorpe died, his archive went into her trusted photographic hands. She's a remarkable woman photographer of the 70s. Big, everyone in New York art world knows her, but not enough people out there, photography history people know her. Lynn Davis, in particular, she has a body of work where she traveled to sacred sites around the globe, from Cambodia to Vietnam to the pyramids. Monuments is one of her most famous books. And then her other ode is to, which is a companion piece, which is to icebergs. She photographed icebergs as they melt over the course of 20 years. Lynn Davis, remarkable photographer, my neighbor in Hudson, New York. She took me under her wing long ago, and I watch her with grace. She has lived a good life, and many tragic things have happened to her, and she walks with just beauty and grace at all times.
What's your superpower?
Redhead bass player.
The best. And last one, how many fucks do you give?
Great question. 10 million fucks I give of nothing. I don't. Someone recently told me, even though I'm such a good girl, and I really do consider everybody else's situation, I always do what I want at the end of the day anyway. I can't help it. At the end of the long journey, I'm sorry. I'm going to do me, and you can't tell me otherwise. But I do it politely.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoy The Shift and would like to show your appreciation, why not buy me a coffee? Go to www.buymeacoffee.com/The Shift with Sam Baker. You can hear a new episode of The Shift every Tuesday, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, please do rate, review, follow, tell your friends, because it really does help other people find us. And if you'd like to know more about my own experience of shifting, my book, The Shift, How I Lost and Found Myself After 40, and you can too, is out now in paperback.